All right, let's dive in today, and we're going to explore someone who I find very interesting, Padre Pio, a Capuchin priest, and, he was known for these alleged miracles and just mysteries that surrounded him and really his whole life.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking specifically at the YouTube video. It's by Armchair Investigator.
Okay.
And the title is The Extraordinary Life of Padre Pio, Unveiling His Mysteries and Miracles.
Catchy.
It really is, right?
Yeah.
There's a ton of information in this video, and so our goal today is to really go through and highlight some of the most interesting parts and then explore, what made Padre Pio so compelling to so many people.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting, a blend of this simple, he wants a simple life dedicated to prayer, but then he ends up being this global figure.
Yeah.
So many devotees,
Yeah, and it all starts in a small Italian village. It was originally named Francesco Forgione. Born in 1887 to a very devout peasant family. And even as a child, his piety was off the charts. I mean, he slept on the floor at age 5 as an act of penance.
Wow. Yeah, that's some serious devotion right there.
It really is. And for him, visions of Jesus and Mary were not extraordinary. They were just part of his everyday life.
It's it makes you wonder, how those such intense religious experiences at such a young age, how that shapes someone.
Right. Yeah.
Whether it was purely spiritual or are there psychological factors at play? That's a question that, we can kind of look at throughout his whole life.
Yeah. And then you layer on the fact that he had all these health challenges, from childhood, severe intestinal disorders. And at 10 years old, he almost died.
Oh, wow. So the theme of illness is recurring. I wonder if those, were... did those result from his very intense spiritual life?
Right.
Or were there other factors, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people probably wondered about that. Medical professionals, theologians. It's interesting.
Yeah, but even with all that, his dedication to the priesthood, it never wavered. Yep. And he felt this very strong pull towards the Capuchin order. And of course, they're known for their very austere lifestyle.
Right, with the beards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but his family... they had different aspirations for him. They wanted him to pursue a more traditional academic path.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
But he felt called. He was called to this. His father actually ended up having to go to America to find work in order to finance the private education.
Oh, wow.
That was required to enter into the Capuchin order.
Wow, that's dedication from the family as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of dedication, Capuchin training, so we're talking vows of poverty, chastity, obedience, but it's way more than that, right?
Oh, yeah. Intense prayer,
strict
self-denial, and even self-flagellation.
Wow.
As a way to purify themselves spiritually.
Intense. And Padre Pio, he was all in on this. He would ask permission to do anything, even get a haircut.
Really? Oh, wow. So his obedience was absolute.
Absolute.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I think that says a lot about his character, right? That he believed that, even his physical suffering, everything was an offering to God.
Yeah.
And a way to atone for the sins of others.
And then on top of that, he would go into these states called religious ecstasy, and reportedly multiple times per day.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about a trance-like state, visions, a heightened awareness.
So there's documentation of him doing this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Padre Agostino, a fellow friar, he documented these episodes. And even while he was in these states, he would speak very coherently, discuss real people and events that he had no prior knowledge of.
Wow. So it's it's almost like he has a window, right, into this dimension beyond our normal perception.
Yeah, exactly. And then layered on top of that are the reports of demonic attacks, which he perceived as real as the spiritual visions.
Oh, wow. So this duality, right, this kind of the divine but also the demonic is a recurring theme throughout his life.
Yeah.
And I think that helps explain, the intense reactions he got from people, right?
Yeah.
Some people were just so devoted to him and other people were skeptical.
Yeah.
And then we get to, the probably most famous thing about him, the stigmata.
Yeah.
Wounds that are like Christ's crucifixion wounds.
Yeah.
Imagine that all of a sudden you have these marks on your body.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's this physical manifestation of Christ's suffering.
Yeah, so stigmata has, it holds huge significance within Christianity, St. Francis of Assisi, being the first recorded case. But Padre Pio's experience is the first documented instance of a priest bearing the stigmata in centuries.
Wow. So it's no wonder that people were like flocking to see him.
Yeah.
Right. Hoping for his blessings, believing that they were seeing a miracle.
Absolutely.
Right there in front of them.
And of course, with wounds like that, there's going to be a lot of skepticism.
Of course.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So some people, were like, well, is it carbolic acid? Is he doing this to himself?
Yeah.
But the medical evidence surrounding these wounds it's contradictory.
Interesting.
Like some doctors that looked at them, they're like, well, they don't look as deep or inflamed as, what you would think. But others documented that they did pierce all the way through his hands and they bled a lot, even after being bandaged for days.
So the medical evidence is all over the place.
It is. Yeah. And then there's this like fragrant odor.
Oh, I've heard about this.
Yeah. It's often described as like the scent of roses.
So it's like his body, his physical body becomes like a battleground, for these spiritual forces that we can't really comprehend.
Yeah, and I think let's move into his life at the friary in San Giovanni Rotondo. But I mean, obviously, with this kind of attention, things were getting a little chaotic there.
Yeah, I mean, thousands of visitors.
Yeah.
Long lines for confessions. People trying to get relics from his clothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can imagine that kind of fame for somebody who really wanted just a simple life of prayer.
Yeah. I mean, he really tried to keep his routine, but with all those people around, it's got to change things up a bit, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, he was known for being pretty strict in the confessional.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've heard about this, that he was very blunt.
Yeah.
And would dismiss people if he thought they weren't being sincere.
Yeah, and people, some people say, well, is that being too harsh?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I think he was just trying to do what he felt was right.
Right. Yeah. I think, some people might see that as a sign of his, spiritual authority, but then other people might see it as arrogance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or even cruelty.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, right?
Yeah. And then there's this stuff about bilocation.
Oh, right. Yeah. This is where he could be in like two places at once.
Yeah. So like people would say, he appeared to me in this distant location, but he was actually back at the friary.
Right. So this just, fueled the belief, whether it's true or not, it fueled the belief that he had, supernatural powers.
Yeah.
That he could defy reality as we understand it, right?
Yeah. And then there's the story of the Home for the Relief of Suffering.
Okay.
Which is a state-of-the-art hospital that he envisioned. It focused on both physical and spiritual healing.
Wow. That's pretty ambitious.
Very ambitious.
Yeah.
And he really wanted to create a space where the sick and the suffering could, find solace and healing, both for their bodies and their souls.
Right. So he's recognizing that those two things are linked.
Yeah.
You can't have one without the other, really.
And he insisted on advanced technology.
Okay.
And he really wanted it to have like a cheerful and welcoming environment.
Wow.
Which was pretty revolutionary for hospitals at that time.
Right, yeah.
He even wanted to expand it into a full-blown hospital city.
Wow. So it's a testament to his vision and determination.
Yeah.
And it shows, an understanding that, physical and spiritual well-being are connected.
Yeah.
And that's, something that, still resonates today in modern healthcare.
Yeah.
But before we get into the alleged miracles, and there are many, what stands out to you about this first part of his life?
What stands out to me is just the contradictions.
Yeah.
Right. You have this guy who's like so devout, so obedient, has these incredible experiences, and yet he's also, very human. He's struggling with these health issues.
Right.
He's dealing with all this attention that he doesn't really want.
Yeah, and it's a theme that we see, in a lot of figures throughout history, right?
Yeah.
The tension between, the divine and the human.
Yeah.
And that's something that makes him really compelling, I think, to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because we could all relate to that in some way.
Right.
We all have those struggles.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Padre Pio's life, it takes this, even more intriguing turn when we start exploring these alleged miracles.
Yeah.
That are attributed to him. And these aren't just like simple healings. These are accounts that really push the boundaries of what we know about medicine.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of these stories, like, they're captivating. We're talking about cases that were considered medically incurable.
Right.
And a lot of times these individuals, like, they had tried everything.
Right.
And they turned to Padre Pio, like, as a last resort. So let's start with Maria de Angelis. She was battling a life-threatening aneurysm.
Okay.
And after visiting Padre Pio, her doctor observed significant improvement, like a reduction in swelling that they just couldn't explain.
So this gets to the core of, what a lot of religious traditions believe, right?
Yeah.
Is there divine intervention?
Yeah.
And how does that operate within our scientific understanding?
Right.
Or does it even operate within that, or is it completely transcendent?
Yeah, yeah. And then there's the story of Gemma Di Giorgio, a young girl born blind. She receives a blessing from Padre Pio. He makes the sign of the cross over her eyes.
Okay.
And she can see.
Wow.
And what's even more amazing is that the physical defects in her eyes, they remained.
So her doctor is saying, like, anatomically, she shouldn't be able to see.
Exactly.
But she can see. That's amazing.
Yeah. And then we've got Lucia Bellodio. She had been dealing with diabetes insipidus since she was 14 years old.
Okay.
And she had to drink, like, gallons of water every day.
Oh.
Just to stay hydrated. She collapsed during Mass at Padre Pio's friary. She wakes up. She's completely cured.
Wow. So the doctors attributed this to divine intervention.
Yeah.
It's stories like this that, really spread his fame, right?
Absolutely. As a miracle worker. And then we've got this kind of creepy story of Maria Carboni. This one's like almost like straight out of a horror movie.
Okay.
She was believed to be possessed by demons. And I mean, we're talking violent behavior, speaking in unknown languages, body contorting in like unnatural ways.
So even like the priest that knew her, like the local priest, was convinced.
Yeah, they're like, this is demonic possession. So desperate for help, her family takes her to Padre Pio. He gives her a blessing. She's cured.
So this suggests that, maybe Padre Pio had this unique ability to confront and maybe even alleviate, this spiritual distress, right?
Yeah.
Which is something that, different belief systems throughout history have come up against.
Absolutely, yeah. And then there's this really dramatic story of Giovanni Savino. He was a construction worker.
Okay.
And he lost his right eye in a dynamite explosion.
Oh, my gosh.
I know, right?
Yeah.
The doctors, they confirmed that he had completely lost the eye. His left eye was so badly damaged that they thought he was going to be permanently blind.
Wow.
But then he senses Padre Pio's presence, smells that rose scent. He wakes up. Right eye is fully restored.
No way.
Yes, but here's the twist.
Okay.
He lost sight in his left eye.
It's almost like this divine exchange, right?
Yeah.
Which is really, that brings up a lot of questions, theological questions.
Yeah.
About healing and divine intervention. But the thing is, like, there were multiple witnesses, like his eye was gone.
Yeah.
There's no medical explanation for how it could just come back.
Yeah, so we're not talking about like isolated incidents. There's like tons of reports of healings and miracles that are attributed to Padre Pio, and each one like really challenges our understanding of what's possible.
Yeah, and it's interesting how these miracles a lot of times would happen when, human intervention, like we couldn't do anything.
Right.
And Padre Pio even said, that divine power, it comes in, where our own limitations end.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because it makes you think about, faith, hope, and the potential for healing.
Yeah.
Beyond what we know about medicine.
It's almost like he had this intuition about when medical intervention would work.
Right.
And when it was time for something more.
Yeah, some people even call him the doctor.
Yeah.
Right? Because people would, seek his counsel before they had surgery.
Yeah.
Because they valued his spiritual insights as much as, what a doctor would tell them.
Like Dr. Melillo.
Yeah.
He insisted that he didn't need this risky brain surgery.
Right.
And he told the doctor, no, I don't need it. The doctors, of course, are like, you need this.
Right.
He survived.
So he went against medical advice.
Yes.
Based on Padre Pio's, insistence.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that really shows you how much trust people put in Padre Pio's insights.
Yeah.
Even when it went against, what the medical professionals were saying.
And it wasn't just physical healing. People believed he had this ability to sense impending death, even in people who looked healthy.
Okay, so like he just knew when people were going to die.
Yeah, and some even said he could perceive the afterlife.
Wow.
There's this really moving story of a mother who feared that her son had died in the war.
Oh, wow.
Padre Pio consoles her, tells her that he can't locate the young man's soul in the afterlife, which means he must still be alive.
Wow.
And guess what? Her son was alive.
Wow. So he was a prisoner of war.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
So you're talking about stuff that just makes you question, what are the limits of perception? Is there more to reality than what we can see and touch? But as with any life that has this kind of extraordinary stuff going on, there were challenges and there were controversies with Padre Pio.
Of course.
And these controversies, they weren't just like personal attacks. They really kind of get into this larger debate within the Catholic Church itself.
Yeah, I mean, they reflect these complexities of faith, right?
Yeah.
And the human element that's always present in religious institutions.
So in 1931, the Holy Office, that's the Vatican department that's responsible for safeguarding Catholic doctrine.
Okay.
They strip Padre Pio of most of his priestly duties. They confine him to the friary. And he even called this time imprisonment.
Wow. So what led to that? Like, what happened?
Well, it was a really rough time for him. There was an unauthorized publication of a book that praised him as a messenger of the Lord.
Okay, so maybe that contributed to the scrutiny he was under.
Yeah, and then there were also rumors about inappropriate relationships with some of his female followers.
But those accusations, they were disproven. Right?
Yeah. Investigations, they consistently disproved these allegations. And eventually, because there were some positive reports from the Pope's representatives,
Okay.
the restrictions on Padre Pio, they were lifted.
So he was allowed to return to public ministry.
Yeah. And his first public mass after that ban, I mean, it was packed. His supporters, they were overjoyed.
Right.
But the controversies didn't stop there.
Okay.
Remember that incident with the hidden tape recorders in the confessional?
Oh, yeah, that was a big deal.
Huge deal.
Yeah.
And I mean, the intention, I guess, was to protect Padre Pio.
Right.
But it sparked a lot of outrage.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
People were concerned about privacy
Absolutely.
and just trust within the church.
Yeah. And it just shows, how sometimes, technology and faith, it can be a tough mix.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you had the accusations of financial mismanagement.
Right. There were the rumors that he had become incredibly wealthy.
Yeah, like he was like the world's richest monk.
The world's richest monk.
And so because of all that, they investigated the finances of the home for the relief of suffering.
Okay.
Didn't find any wrongdoing.
Okay.
But it really highlighted the pressure and the complexities of managing such a huge institution.
Especially when it's associated with somebody as famous as Padre Pio.
Yeah.
So it seems like his life was this constant back and forth, right?
Yeah.
Between the miraculous
Yeah.
and the mundane,
Absolutely.
this blend of deep spirituality and very human weaknesses.
Yeah.
So how do you see this kind of paradoxical nature of his life?
I think it's what makes him so fascinating to so many people.
Yeah.
Because he's this figure who, has these incredible experiences,
Right.
but he's also just a man.
Right.
He's struggling, he's dealing with stuff.
Right.
And I think that makes him relatable.
And I think it makes him human.
As Padre Pio got older, like into his 70s, his health, it really started to decline. And remember, it had never been great.
Right. Yeah.
He was dealing with all sorts of things, arthritis, asthma, heart problems. He was losing his eyesight.
It's amazing that he still kept, serving his congregation.
I know, right?
With all those problems.
Still celebrating Mass, still hearing confessions, even when just standing was a struggle.
It really shows you, his resilience.
Yeah.
Absolutely. His spirit was strong even though his body was failing.
It really was. And it wasn't just, the physical stuff he had to deal with.
Oh, no.
There are accounts that say, the demonic attacks he'd experienced, they actually got worse.
That's kind of scary to think about. What kind of things were happening?
Well, there are stories, of him being thrown from his chair, waking up with bruises and injuries that, nobody could explain.
And there's this one really disturbing incident with a woman. They think she was possessed, and she attacked him.
Oh, wow.
And really hurt him pretty badly.
It's amazing that he could still, hold on to his faith.
It is.
With all those scary things happening to him.
Yeah. And it's interesting because during all this, his views on the afterlife, they seem to kind of soften up a bit.
Oh, really?
He started saying that he thought maybe fewer souls were going to hell.
That's interesting. You think maybe facing his own death changed his thinking about judgment and mercy?
It's possible, right?
Yeah.
It seems like in those last years, he had more compassion, maybe a better understanding of what it means to be human,
Right.
both in this life and the next.
Well, and he did predict his own death, didn't he? He did. He said it would happen when they finished his burial crypt.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. The crypt was done in September 1968, and a few days later he celebrated his last Mass, gave a final blessing, and died peacefully at 81.
It's hard to believe that's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
And I'm sure his funeral was huge.
Oh, it was massive. Over 100,000 people came to San Giovanni Rotondo to say goodbye.
Wow.
It was really a testament to the impact he had on people's lives.
And then, of course, the Catholic Church made him a saint in 2002.
Right.
His story is still so powerful for people.
Absolutely. Padre Pio's legacy, it goes beyond just religion. He represents this human desire to understand faith, the things we can't explain, and the possibility of healing that goes beyond what science can do.
So at the end of our deep dive, what do we make of all this?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah. Was Padre Pio a true mystic? Was he a fake? Or somewhere in between?
Right. Maybe his life shows us that there's always mystery in the human experience.
Right.
A struggle between what we can prove and what we believe.
He makes us think about what we think is possible. What are the limits of what we can understand?
Yeah.
And those big questions about faith, suffering, what life is all about.
I think the biggest thing we can take away from Padre Pio is to be open-minded, but also critical.
Right.
To be aware that incredible things might be possible. But we still need to be thoughtful and look at the world carefully.
So if you're intrigued by all this, go do some more digging.
Yeah.
Research those miracles.
See what other people say.
Think about it all and come to your own conclusions about this mysterious Padre Pio.
You might end up questioning what you thought was possible and rethinking your own beliefs about the world.
Because in the end, the most powerful stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers.
Exactly. They make us want to learn more, to understand better, and to accept that there are always mysteries at the heart of what it means to be human.